June 5, 1946. In a small alpine inn near Berchtesgaden, an American intelligence officer climbs the mountain to interview a woman the world had nearly forgotten. Her name is Paula Wolf, but that's not her real name. She is Paula Hitler, Adolf Hitler's youngest sister. And what she's about to reveal will provide one of the most intimate glimpses into the early life of history's most infamous dictator. Today, we're diving into a remarkable primary source document, an actual interrogation report from 1946 that has been preserved at Oradorinfo. This isn't speculation or hearsay. These are the actual words of Adolf Hitler's sister, speaking just 1 year after the war's end. But who was Paula Hitler? Born in 1896 in Upper Austria, Paula was the youngest of the Hitler children and one of only two who survived to adulthood alongside Adolf. While her brother became the face of Nazi Germany, Paula lived in obscurity, even changing her name to Paula Wolf to escape public attention. By June 1946, she was living in an alpine guest house called the Alpenwirtschaft Vorderbrand, near what had once been her brother's mountain retreat, the famous Berghof. She had just 10,000 marks to her name, having lost everything else. The Russians had seized her house in Lower Austria. The Americans occupied her apartment in Vienna. All her possessions, packed away at a hotel, had vanished. She was 50 years old, alone, and willing to talk. Paula's interview paints a picture of the Hitler household that few historians have heard directly from a family member, and it's complicated. The father, Alois Hitler. Paula describes their father, Alois Hitler, as the absolute type of the old Austrian official, conservative and loyal to his emperor to the skin. But he was also harsh, brutally harsh. According to Paula, young Adolf was beaten daily. Quote, "It was especially my brother Adolf who challenged my father to extreme harshness and who got his sound thrashing every day. He was a scrubby little rogue." Think about that. Daily beatings, a father who demanded absolute obedience, a boy who refused to break. Paula claims their father desperately wanted Adolf to become a civil servant, following in his footsteps. But Adolf wanted none of it. Every attempt to force him into that profession failed, no matter how severe the punishment. The mother, Clara Hitler. In stark contrast was their mother, Clara. Paula describes her as a very soft and tender person, the compensatory element between the almost too harsh father and the very lively children. Clara would caress young Adolf after his beatings, trying to reach him with kindness where the father failed with violence. The family dynamic is clear. An iron-fisted father, a gentle mother caught in between, and a rebellious child who would bow to no authority. The death of the parents. In January 1903, when Adolf was 13 and Paula was just 6, their father died suddenly of heart failure. Paula says he was carried home dead from his morning pint, apparently dying at a local tavern. But it was their mother's death that truly shaped both siblings. In December 1907, Clara Hitler died of breast cancer. Paula describes this period with striking emotion. "During this time, my mother was severely ill. We were most unhappy. Assisting me, my brother Adolf spoiled my mother during this time of her life with overflowing tenderness. He was indefatigable in his care for her, wanted to comply with any desire she could possibly have." Adolf Hitler, the future dictator, spent those final months providing tender, devoted care to his dying mother. Paula remembers him as being desperate to fulfill her every wish, her last desire, to be buried next to the father who had beaten their son daily, and Adolf made sure it happened. This is the paradox that runs through Paula's entire testimony. What was young Adolf Hitler actually like? Paula's memories are illuminating. The struggling student. Adolf was, in Paula's words, nothing less than a showboy at school. He came home with bad reports and constant admonitions from teachers. But at home, he was passionate about everything except his schoolwork. Paula remembers him sitting for hours at their beautiful Heitzmann grand piano, a gift from their mother. He was obsessed with Wagner and Liszt. She recalls that Adolf attended the opera Die Götterdämmerung 13 times. 13 times. His Christmas present to his mother was always a theater ticket. He was also already pursuing watercolor painting during his school years. And Paula mentioned something fascinating. Even as a teenager, Adolf would give lectures on themes concerning history and policy to my mother and me in a rhetorical way. The orator was already developing. Vienna and the Lost Years. After their mother's death, Adolf moved to Vienna. Paula stayed in Linz with their aunt. Adolf would send her letters recommending books. She remembers he sent her Don Quixote, thinking she would particularly enjoy it. But then, silence. By 1908, Adolf stopped writing. Paula wouldn't hear from him for 13 years. Think about that timeline. From 1908 to 1921, Paula had no contact with her brother. These were Adolf's lost years, the Vienna period where he struggled as a failed artist, lived in homeless shelters, and developed the toxic ideology that would later consume millions of lives. The 1921 reunion. Paula finally saw Adolf again in 1921 in Vienna. By then, he had moved to Munich, served in World War I, been injured and temporarily blinded, and had become the leader of the Nazi Party. Paula describes this reunion as a great and happy event. She was living alone in modest conditions, working as a secretary. Her brother, the one she thought might have died in the war, showered her with affection and gifts that seemed like exorbitant luxury to her. But they would rarely meet after that. Paula's life during the Nazi years is a study in deliberate invisibility. She never joined the Nazi Party. According to her, Adolf never asked her to, and she had no interest in his politics. When the name Hitler became famous and toxic in Vienna, Paula was actually fired from her job. That's when she changed her name to Paula Wolf. She went to Munich, explained her situation to Adolf, and he promised to provide for her. He sent her 250 marks monthly at first, then 500 marks after 1938, plus 3,000 marks every Christmas. She lived comfortably, but quietly. Paula only visited the Berghof, Hitler's mountain retreat, occasionally, staying perhaps 8 to 14 days at a time. She describes watching her brother's rise and power only from afar. Quote, "I was much too fond of Vienna to leave it. I have never been very ambitious for myself and never appeared at official fetes. I was often told in Vienna that I did never show off, but always did just the opposite." In 1941 or 1942, with Adolf's financial help, she bought a small villa in Lower Austria. She furnished it herself, without an architect. It was her quiet refuge. But in mid-April 1945, as the Third Reich collapsed, 2 SS men arrived in a car. They had orders to fetch her. She packed everything, trunks, chests, boxes, and was taken to Berchtesgaden. Her belongings went to a hotel. She was moved to a mountain hut, where she stayed until December 1945. By Christmas 1945, she was at the Alpenwirtschaft Forderbrand, where she would be interviewed 6 months later. Now we come to the most controversial part of Paula's testimony. And here, even the American officer conducting the interview becomes skeptical. On the Holocaust, Paula's statement is stunning in its denial. "I do not believe that my brother ordered the crime committed to innumerable human beings in the concentration camps, or that he even knew of these crimes." She suggests his anti-Jewish attitude came from his years starving in Vienna, believing his failure as an artist was because trade in works of art was in Jewish hands. The American officer wasn't buying it. In his closing remarks, he writes, "Unworthy of belief, however, is her declaration that she did never know anything about the innumerable crimes. She also insisted on the fact that she never noticed his threat to destroy the Jews in Europe, in his speeches which were transferred by radio over the whole world and also to Vienna." He points out the obvious contradiction. Paula claims her brother was radiant with kindness, yet he ordered the systematic murder of 6 million Jews and started a war that killed tens of millions more. The officer's warning. The American officer who interviewed Paula saw something dangerous, not in Paula herself, but in what she represented. He writes, "This woman must not be allowed to become the protectress of the mountain in which the soul of her brother is only lying dormant, to rise again to new life and to new crimes against human nature." He feared reporters would climb the mountain, seeking sensational stories, creating a Hitler myth for a new generation. He worried about German authors offering an immortal hero of the type of Barbarossa to youth always longing for romanticism. His prescription: no vindictiveness against a lonely, at least with regard to her actions, guiltless woman. But get her away from publicity. She could become a germ cell for a new disaster, maybe against her own wishes. So what do we make of Paula Hitler's testimony? What rings true? The family details Paula provides align remarkably well with historical records. The harsh father, the gentle mother, Adolf's poor school performance, his artistic ambitions, his passion for Wagner, these are all confirmed by other sources. Her description of Adolf's tender care for their dying mother is particularly important. It complicates our understanding of Hitler, not to humanize or excuse him, but to understand the psychological complexity of someone capable of both intimate tenderness and industrial-scale genocide. What doesn't hold up? Paula's claims about the Holocaust are simply impossible to accept. Hitler's eliminationist anti-Semitism was public, vocal, and central to Nazi ideology. His speeches explicitly called for the destruction of European Jewry. The idea that his own sister, living in Nazi-controlled territory, somehow missed all of this strains credulity beyond breaking point. It's worth noting that Paula might have had practical reasons for her denials. By claiming ignorance and no party membership, she could keep her bank account and avoid prosecution or internment. The psychological portrait. What's most valuable in this document is the window it provides into Hitler's formative years. A childhood marked by severe paternal violence and maternal tenderness. A pattern of rejecting all authority from an early age. A consuming passion for art, music, and performance. The development of his rhetorical skills as a teenager. The trauma of losing his mother, whom he deeply loved. Years of poverty and failure in Vienna that he blamed on Jewish conspiracy. These aren't excuses, they're context. Understanding how a scrubby little rogue who cared tenderly for his dying mother became the architect of the Holocaust is essential if we're to prevent such horrors from happening again. Paula's later life. Paula Hitler lived until 1960, dying at age 64 in Berchtesgaden. She maintained her quiet existence, never seeking publicity. The American officer's wish to keep her away from public attention was largely honored. She never married. She never had children. She died as she had lived for most of her life, in the shadow of her infamous brother. The 1946 interview with Paula Hitler is a remarkable historical artifact. It's one of the few times a member of Hitler's immediate family spoke on record about his early life. It shows us that behind the monster of history was once a boy, a difficult, talented, troubled boy, shaped by violence and loss. But it also shows the limits of family loyalty and personal denial in the face of overwhelming evidence. Paula claimed her brother was kind to her. That was probably true. But kindness to one sister doesn't cancel out the murder of millions. The capacity for familial love doesn't contradict the capacity for genocidal hatred. And that's perhaps the most disturbing lesson of all. If you want to read the full interview transcript yourself, I've linked the source in the description below. It's important that these primary sources remain accessible, so we never forget. Thanks for watching. If you found this deep dive valuable, please like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments. What surprised you most about Paula's testimony? Until next time.